What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Virzi Effect podcast show. My name is Paul Virzi, and you guys listening to episode 460. And this is an episode I've been waiting for a long time because me and my guest today, we hit it off in a very kind of weird way where I was doing a split week with him. We'll get into it. We'll talk about it. But you guys know him from amazing comedy specials on Netflix, Superior Donuts, which was an amazing sitcom. Also, the Friday After Next, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Maz Jobrani is on the program. What's up, brother?
What's up, Paul? How are you, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, buddy. I'm hanging in there. I was saying, as we were getting started, the last time you and I really got a chance to talk, you were in town in LA. It was early March, and you came on my podcast.
Yes.
And as we were talking, I was telling you how I had shows, I think like March 6th and 7th or something. They were supposed to be in Toronto, Jersey, and Ottawa. Yeah.
Yes.
And I started getting, because at that point, the government had not yet admitted to or declared any kind of lockdown. They were like, oh, it's fine. And I think all of us as live performers, we were all kind of stumbling going, well, if the government's not saying it's a problem, then I guess it's not a problem. So
right.
We're going to move forward. And so I was getting ready to go to do the shows in Canada. And that's when my fans in Canada started writing me emails going, don't come. This coronavirus thing is real. And if you come and you're going to do a show with several hundred or 1,000 people all together, it's going to spread. So because of them, I had to cancel. And you were getting ready to go perform somewhere. I forget where it was that weekend. Maybe it was West Nyack or something.
That's exactly where it was.
Yeah. And you were like, yeah, I'm going. I mean, people are going to show up. No one said anything. And so we all were still, and I'm the same. We were all kind of going, no one's officially said anything. So let's just keep going. And then I think it was like a few days later when the NBA was like, shut it down. And then everyone was like, shut it down.
It's funny that you said that because I think that the commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, I think he saved and spared a lot of people and he saved a lot of lives because it's funny that you said that. That weekend, I was coming home. I think I was coming home around March 3rd from LA. And I did your show. I did a couple of shows. I did one at the store and one at the Laugh Factory. Me and Burr had went to a Laker game. And I remember coming home on March 3rd. And then the 6th, 7th, and 8th, I was at Levity Live. And, I called up. I said, is anybody canceling? I'm hearing, this was 2 weeks before the lockdown. So I either because me and my whole family got coronavirus. We talked about that, I think. So,
yeah.
So myself, my wife, and my 2 kids all tested positive for the antibodies. I either got it in West Nyack or my wife's birthday is March 15th. March 14th, we went to a local place. It was open. There was nothing up here, especially up in the Hudson Valley, Connecticut area where we are. Went out to a Mexican restaurant for her birthday. And I remember looking around going like, it's a little too busy in here for me with the rumors. And then sure enough, the next weekend is when everything got shut down. And then late, I would say 10 days after that is when my symptoms started. So I either got it at Levity or the weekend after. But yeah, man, since the last time I saw you, the world has literally flipped upside down. And, and here we are, man. And it's 6 months later, dude.
Dude, it's crazy. It's funny because I still have not, like, you've got your studio. So did you have your studio set up before or did you do it after?
So this room that I'm sitting in right now was just a little off storage space that my wife had. We would put stuff in here. It was really beat up and the walls were falling down. And once this happened, after I recovered from Corona in early April, I just stripped it, painted it, and made it a podcast studio.
You're amazing because I started like, it's been an evolution. I was just talking to my wife about this. It feels like, I mean, everyone says this is cliche now, but 2020 feels like 10 years in one. And so,
yeah,
we had a little side room, like you said, and I set it up with like my daughter's teddy bear and some toilet paper behind me and yada, yada. I'm doing Zoom shows. And then my wife started working again. And then, so she took over that space. And then I got into the bedroom and I started doing Zooms with like the bed behind me, and my wife was like, "That's not a good look." So now we have this other office in the back that I'm trying to turn into something. But it's funny because I've been pretty lazy about it, and it wasn't until I saw Judd Apatow had a tweet. He was like, if you still sound like in your podcast like you're broadcasting from the bottom of a well, you're lazy as hell,
Yeah.
because you've had 4 months at that point, 4 months to get a microphone and do it right. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? So I'm headed your way. I think I'm going to set it up and get it nice.
Well, you know what, too? Nobody expected this time. Nobody expected us to be sitting here. I don't think anybody expected us to be sitting here. I remember when this first happened and we're going, maybe June, July, the world will be normal. And I think that, I hate to say this, but I think we're looking at another year before we are actually fully functional. Now, luckily, there are some places that are doing stuff safe outside. I just did the Stress Factory. So what happened was Chris DiStefano, shout out to Chrissy D and Giannis Pappas. They do the History Hyenas podcast. Chris DiStefano was booked to do the Stress Factory. What Vinny Brand at the Stress Factory did in New Brunswick, and I got to give him credit, he basically invested in an outdoor venue. He just has this gigantic tent. It could rain. You don't feel it. The crowd is far back. It's as safe as it could be. You wear different mics, and I did it, and the normalcy felt good. And but now it's a different world, man. You can't be inside. I don't know when things are going to get better. But here's the other thing, man. I realized too, not working for 6 months when you're a comedian is, it hits. So as much as it was like, hey man, I'm going to be safe, and I want to be safe, and I'm wearing a mask, and I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. But at the same time, it gets to a point where it's like, A, I don't want to forget the craft that I love, and B, I got a family.
Yeah. No, absolutely on both of those. It's interesting because, listen, I think there's a lot of transitions happening. The podcast world, all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, because it used to be like, I'm a comedian and I got a podcast. Now it's like, I got to find out a way to make a living out of the podcast, or Cameo or Patreon or whatever that is. So that's one thing. It's like the idea, like you said, I got to feed my family, so I got to figure out a way to make a living. I love these outdoor, the creativity. I'm getting ready to do one in Irvine where they're doing a rooftop at the Irvine Improv. It's going to be a rooftop drive-in. So people drive in with their cars. You're on stage with a big screen behind you. You're going to do comedy with them in their cars. I don't know what that's going to be like, because I can't really hear you in your car. So that's going to be weird. But I did just a few weeks ago. I've been doing kind of this thing called Maz in the House, where it's like a talk show. I'm trying to just try it out, because you know how it is. Look, at first I was doing Zoom stand-up shows. The problem with Zoom stand-up shows is, if your fans keep coming on, they're going to expect new material every time, and that's not doable. So I was like, let's do Maz in the House, where it's a monologue, then I have my co-host, then I bring on a guest, et cetera, et cetera. And the Comedy Store said, it's basically another version of another podcast. So the Comedy Store said, well, we're starting to do it from the original room with the window right in front of you, and they've got people on the patio having drinks, and they're listening while you're also zooming out to the world. So we did that, and it was fun. But then right after, they go, hey, do you want to try some stand-up in front of this window? It's almost like, because, the Comedy Store has red lights. So it's kind of like a red light district, like you're in the window.
Yeah.
They're out there. And it was interesting because they still had the list from March 12th. The night of March 12th was the last night that they did comedy. And I did it that night at the Comedy Store and the Laugh Factory. And then coming back just a couple of weeks ago, I was the first one back up because no one else had done it. They go, you want to try this? I go, sure. And it was so fun to just be standing in front of a crowd, even though the crowd was outside the window. It was like you said, it's like, we have found something we love to do. It's not like a job that we hated doing where you're like, oh, thank God I'm not getting that job. I don't have to do that job and unemployment checks are coming in. No, we want to do it. And as you said, it's tough. It's part of our identity.
Yeah, it's like after a while, I got afraid. Can I do this again? I've been doing it for so many years, and can I do it? But the funny thing is, and you'll see this when you do the drive-in, and I've seen you, and I don't want to make you feel embarrassed or uncomfortable, but you're very good at what you do, and you're the type of person that your personality, but me and you are similar in the way that we feed off of people, and we feed, like, we need that I'm an energetic comic that performs, and I know you are too, and we move and we talk, and our personality kind of comes out during our thing, and when people see that, it comes in. So I don't know what the car thing will be like. I'd love to obviously hear from you when you do that, but I know your instincts. Like, what happened with me when I did the outdoor show is, after a couple of minutes of just talking and seeing, it just, the timing, it does come back. And then all of a sudden, by the second show, like, so the first show I did was at 7:30, and it was good. I had great crowd work moments, and I would say that it was a really good, strong set. Second show, I was back because it just came back. So I think, I think that is going to happen. I want to tell the listeners how we met, because how we met was really cool. And you did something really, really amazing to me. And you're one of the only comics that has ever done this, ever. In all the comics that have watched me perform. So we were doing a split week. For the people that don't know, split week means that two headliners go into the same city in the same club on the same weekend, and one does the 8 and the other does the 10. And that's what happened. So we were at Zany's in Nashville. We were talking. As a matter of fact, Chrissy D was there, oddly enough, that he came and he did a guest spot on my show. We had just come back from Vegas that day from Salvicano's. Salvicano's had a little thing. Anyway, so we're out there, and you come out, and I see you. We talked briefly, and you come out, and you were just kind of looking and smiling and laughing, and you came in and you said funny stuff. And then on the next show, you stayed and you watched again. And I was like, wow, man, that's really cool, man, like a comic to watch. And then you said something where I'll never forget this. You said, hey, man, that joke that you're doing about when you don't park close enough to the store, and your wife gets like that, and then you get mad. And then you just started breaking down like why that happens psychologically. Like, instead of, so you took the joke. This is, I mean, and for the people listening, this is how crazy it is for a comic to do this. So you saw the joke, you saw my emotions in the joke, which means you saw that I was having there was a real reaction. And then you actually, instead of another comic, because so many comics will come up and go, hey, man, that joke, that's funny. I could tell it was real. You broke it down psychologically, why it happened. And that was really like, you're like, is that kind of new? And I'm like, well, I'm putting it in, I'm trying things. And you were like, yeah, your emotions and the anger with it. And this is why, because maybe in the relationship. And I was just like, oh my God, dude, this dude is right. So like, you broke down a bit in two different ways, but I never had somebody like almost like a therapist psychologically break it down. And then we went out that night, we had a glass of wine at the hotel, and then we watched UFC the next day, and we had that amazing Southern chicken. But it was a really cool story about how two comics connect, but I was very taken back by how you broke it down psychologically.
Well, yeah, I think, listen, look, first of all, we love comedy, right? So we love comedy. And I always tell people I love all kinds of comedy. Like, I love political comedy and I love silly comedy.
Yeah.
And then you and I have a similar type in that I think we bring it from our families, our experiences. You know, I'm sure you've had people come up to you. I get people sometimes that hit me up. They'll be like, hit me up online. They go, hey, I have something that happened to me. Maybe you can take that and bring it on stage. And I go, I can't, because it's got to happen to me. I have to talk about what happened to me. Right. So similarly with you, that's what I think we have in common. And yeah. I love watching comics that I find funny, and I go, and as you said, it's like it's a good exercise for us. It's a writing exercise, right? Because we sit back and we go, oh, here's a tag, here's a tag, here's a tag, or here's another way to get deeper into that. And so I think that's what happened in that, because as someone who, you know, we have that in common. We're both married, we have kids. Yeah. So someone who, and I love, like, if I could go back to college and study something, it would be psychology. Yes. And I think if you can get into the psychology of a joke and you can start breaking down, why were you being like that? Why was, you know, that's what stand-up comedy does. It's like, it's not just a joke. It's the idea of, like Richard Pryor saying, I shot the engine in my car with my gun. And then stepping back and analyzing why and what happened and how that woman, his wife, has driven him crazy to the point, and da-da-da-da-da-da. you could take a short story and elongate it, because now you're analyzing. And a lot of times I think that's another thing that happens is once you start analyzing, it becomes self-deprecating, and the audience finds sympathy in that. Because you go, I was yelling at my wife with the why we got to park, da 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 da, and then I step back, I was like, I'm an asshole. Like, why am I? Or I step back and I realize, that bitch pissed me off a week before, and I was holding that in. Whatever that is. I think it's fantastic. I love that stuff, and I'm that weekend was a great weekend. You're right. We hit it off. Our love of red wine. I was telling you on. I think I was on your Instagram live for a second. I said we should do a night. Matter of fact, I want to do this with you because I'm going to start doing. Listen, when this shit happened again, I started doing Instagram live every day at like 4 or 5, just like silly stuff. And it's funny because we were like, what's the word I'm looking for? Sanitizing all our groceries. We were really hypersensitive. And so I started wearing this like purple dishwashing glove and holding my daughter's karaoke mic. Yeah, and I called it the Purple Glove Show. And I started doing it every day, 4 o'clock LA time. And then it became a lot of work because I'd be like hanging out with my kids and I'd be like, guys, I gotta go do my,
Purple
and
Glove.
so yeah, I stopped doing the Purple Glove Show, but I think I'm gonna start doing, maybe on Fridays, I'll do just check in with people and go, what do you got planned for the weekend? And I would love for you and me, we should pick up wine and just taste it, like a wine taste and talk, because we had that in common too.
We should do like a red wine. We should do a red wine spot where we pour a glass, like you talk about the wine that you got and the reviews you heard about it. I talk about that wine, just talk about, oh, is it good? And then we just shoot the shit for like whatever, a half hour, hour, and we do it once. Yeah, absolutely, man. And see, but there's another reason why me and you hit it off. There's another reason, because the personalities are similar, the lifestyle, your family, your kids, but there's a reason why you and I, both of mine and your icons or hero is Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy Raw for me, because it was 87. My dad took us to it. I was just absolutely we went to a movie theater. We were in Yonkers, New York. The place was called Movie Land. And my grandmother and mother said, you cannot take him to this, and this was like, I think this was 87. So Beverly Hills Cop or 48 Hours, or the Trading Places had already come out, but I think Beverly Hills Cop. So because Raw was a couple years after Delirious. And I remember he came up in the limo and it said Raw on the license plate. And he got out like a rock star. And I remember his arm was up behind the thing. I'm getting the chills just thinking about it. And when I talked to you, you said the same thing. I was like how Eddie was your guy. But when I watch you perform, and I watch myself perform, and I'm sure when you saw me, we're obviously talking about different things, but the way that we go about it and our personalities, and you could tell the comedy that we loved growing up is true to what we're doing. And I think that not that I wouldn't get along and go get some Southern chicken with somebody who was different, but I think that the connection that we were, because I remember watching one of the jokes you did, I believe it was your Netflix special, and I'm watching this guy stalk the stage the way I do, and I'm walking the stage, and I use that square footage to, because I have to. And I think that when you see people like that, it's almost like if me and you were NBA players, we would have the same type of game. If we were both a number 2, we would both be a number 2 on the court. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Listen, Eddie Murphy affected a lot of our generation. Like when he came back on Saturday Night Live, I was watching a lot of people's Instagram. So whether it was like Joe Coy or like Sebastian Maniscalco or there was a bunch of dudes. I mean, you saw the guys that showed up at the actual show, from Tracy Morgan to Chappelle, Chris Rock. He affected a lot of us, and I think he's in our subconscious. I agree with you, because there's, obviously there's some people who got, they came up in the world of, they might have gone more to the writing side, or they might have gone into the more subtle. I think we are, and that part of that is this like nervous energy when you're up there. It's a confident energy. I compare stand-up comedy sometimes to surfing, and that, especially when you get off your material and you start doing the crowd work, And I think you got to be in the moment. It's Zen, right? So I imagine, I've tried surfing once in my life and I had a hard time because I have a bad back. But when you see a surfer on there, they're on the wave, they're in the moment. I don't think as a surfer, you could be under that wave thinking about your taxes or about your
Right.
ex-wife, or about, you got to be in the moment and the wave takes you wherever it's going to take you. So similarly, when you're doing your show, you're like blah 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 blah, and you start talking about my kids, this, that, the other, and someone's picking their nose in the front, you just start talking to them. Now you're on that wave and you're just going.
Yeah.
And you're confident, but there's also a nervous energy underneath, because you're like, what if the next thing I say doesn't come out right? But you're not thinking about that because you're on the wave. So similar to what you were saying, when you're pacing around that stage, that's that like nervous energy and confident energy all crashing into one. And absolutely, Eddie, I think was huge and instrumental in all of us. I actually saw Raw in the theaters, and I have the ticket stubs from seeing him at the Oakland Coliseum in '87. I remember going to see him live in the Raw concert, and I use that as an example when people sometimes they go, yeah, you go, we got this show together, there's 10 comics and it's going to be like a 3-hour show. I go, let me tell you something. I go, people get tired from laughing. You either you gotta do an hour and a half or nothing. Because I tell them, I go, when I was a kid in '87, I went and saw Eddie Murphy, who was my hero, in concert. And I remember 45 minutes into it, I was laughing so much that I was exhausted. I had to stop. I was like, I can't laugh anymore. It was like I needed a break, you know?
90 minutes is kind of it. Like sometimes when there'll be shows running late in New York City, whether it's the Stand or even the Cellar, sometimes when, even though the crowds are great and they're packed, when somebody's seen 8 comedians and everybody's a killer, everybody's a national headliner pretty much, and now you're going up there. Now all of a sudden you're like 2 hours and 10 minutes in. You're like, just keep it. You know what? Less is more, man. You get them out of there in 90 minutes and they were blown away. I would rather do that. I want to talk to you about where you grew up. So you're from Iran,
Mm-hmm.
born in the United States or no?
Born in Iran and 72, and then in late 78, so there was protests in Iran, and the Iranian Revolution happens in 1979, but the protests start in 78, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the protests are against the Shah, who's basically the king of Iran, and he is a dictator, but he's modernized the country a lot. And so there's a lot of good things that come with the Shah, but there's still a lot of bad things. You know, when you are a king of a country, you know, you're going to have your secret police. You're going to have a lot of enemies. So a lot of different factions that were opposed to the Shah, they started protesting. It got bigger, bigger, bigger. So late 78, my father was a successful businessman in Iran. He had an electric company. So, you know, I always describe my father as Vito Corleone from The Godfather. I swear to God, he was this larger than life character, and people that needed favors would come to my dad, whether it was borrowing money, getting their kids out of military service, you know, sending their kids abroad, whatever it was. My dad was always generous in doing that stuff. So he comes to New York on business in late 78, and the protests are getting worse and worse. So he tells my mom, he goes, hey, why don't you bring the kids? My mom brought me and my older sister. It was our winter break. And so it was a 2-week break. And he goes, since the schools are closed, there's protests going on, come to New York, hang out with me a little bit, and then you guys can go back. And we even left my baby brother. I had a baby brother. We left him in Iran at the time. And we come to New York, and my dad, because he was successful, he was doing business in America, he's staying at the Plaza Hotel. So I show up as a 6-year-old kid. We're in a suite at the Plaza Hotel. FAO Schwartz is across the street.
Oh my God.
I'm like, this is fantastic. We're ordering
Home Alone 2.
Home Alone 2, exactly. Home Alone 2, man. And we're ordering strawberry bowls of strawberry with whipped cream coming upstairs from room service. I mean, it was heaven.
Oh.
And meanwhile, though, the protests in Iran get more and more and more, to the point where I always say we packed for 2 weeks and we stayed for 40 whatever years it is.
Wow.
And and a lot of people, I tell you, Paul, it's interesting. A lot of people that you talk to that came from Iran at that time have similar experiences. There was people who were like, my family got up, we packed, and ran away. And that's why I have a soft spot, as you know, in my heart for immigrants, whether they're coming from Central America or they're coming from Syria or wherever. I go, listen, these people are coming from a bad situation and they're struggling to come and do well in America. And so that's why when protests happen against the travel ban, I showed up. That's why whenever there's any kind of immigrant stuff, I don't know if you've seen this show on Netflix, it's called Immigration Nation.
No, I have not. I saw the title. I did not see it yet.
Dude, I'm usually really good at even when a show is tough to watch, I'm good at binge watching and getting through it. I've gotten into 2 episodes and I had to take a break because it is so heartbreaking. It talks about, listen, you and I both know, when it comes to politics, there's no saints. Democrats, Republicans, there's
right.
a lot of them are out for themselves, yada, yada. But it was an interesting thing because these guys got access to the immigration service, ICE, and they're following them around. And at one point, this one guy who works for immigration says, listen, under Obama, there was more deportations than ever before, that he was known as the deporter in chief. However, he goes, once Trump came in, he goes, that went to another level. And so shows in this, as a matter of fact, it's in New York City. You've got to watch it because these immigration officers, they're going, it starts out by them saying, we have no problem going around deporting these guys who are here illegally and have committed crimes.
Right.
So a lot of them are talking to the camera going, I have no problem with doing that. This guy committed a crime. He's got to go. But then while it's happening, they get a new directive that says we're deporting people who are just illegal. So came here illegally, they're undocumented. So you see, for example, there's a dude who was a cop in El Salvador. He was working, somehow helping a cop in New York that needed some stuff. They were on the phone talking to each other. Eventually, this guy from El Salvador tells this guy in New York, hey, my life's at risk because the gangs of El Salvador want to come after me. So he gets up with his family and they escape and they come to America. Comes to America, sets up shop in New York and becomes a plumber and is paying his taxes. His kids are going to high school. He's not committing any crimes. And ICE shows up, knocks on his door. His kids are in high school. They speak perfect English like you and I. And they're like, he's got to go. And this poor guy's getting sent back to a place where his life was at risk before.
Wow.
So anyways, very heartbreaking. And that was a little tangent I went on just to say that I came in a privileged way. My father was well enough, rich enough to get us, like I said, Plaza Hotel out the gate. But yeah, I was an immigrant and I came to America. And then from there, we ended up settling in Northern California, a place called Marin County. Now, Marin County is interesting because it's a very rich county. It's one of the richest counties in America. So it's very white. And there we were, not a lot of ethnicity there. But I had a great upbringing. It was really, really nice. I remember in 1985, I think, or 1986, the Kansas City Royals played the St. Louis Cardinals in the World Series.
That was 85 because I believe
86 was the Mets.
Yes.
So 85, Kansas City Royals playing the Cardinals, and the shortstop for the Kansas City Royals was a guy named Buddy Biancalana, who went to my high school. I went to Redwood High School, where Robin Williams had gone as well.
Wow.
I remember watching the World Series, and Al Michaels was talking, and he's like, Buddy Biancalana from Marin County, California, home of the hot tub. And I was like, what does that mean? I have no idea what it meant. He was calling the home of the hot tub.
He used hot tub. Well, let me ask you, if you don't mind me asking, whatever happened to your little brother?
Well, my little brother is funny. I used to joke about, I was like, then he became the president of Iran and a dictator. But no, we got him out like a year or so, like a little while later he came out. And then my little brother, I ended up losing that brother later to addiction. He actually
I'm sorry to hear that
later. But it was heartbreaking because I think some of that separation early on caused separation issues in him throughout his life.
Wow.
But yeah, man, he was my brother Kashi, and it was dude, it was heartbreaking. Again, I'm telling you, that's why my heart. It's so easy to fall for the slogan, right? It's like these people are coming to get us. they're coming after us. They're, they want our jobs. They're MS-13, And then you go, wait a minute. Let's go look at the statistics. Yeah. Let's look at the reality. And the statistics show that a lot of immigrants have committed less crime in America or refugees than Americans have, right? And you look at a lot of immigrants they're hard workers, wherever they're coming from. And so I just remember being a kid. Again, I'm leaving in a privileged way. And I remember being a kid. I mean, when I was a kid leaving that night, I loved my baby brother. He was 5 years younger than me. And I remember he was sleeping in his crib, and I went over and I kissed the bottom of his shoes. He was a little baby. I kissed the bottom of his shoes. I was like, I miss you, little bro. And I didn't know I was going to be gone for that long, and he came, and it's heartbreaking, dude. So when I see,
well, I remember we were out that night. We went out the last night, and so I'll go back. So, I'm good friends with Giannis Pappas, hilarious comedian, friends with him. And Giannis would always do these anti-gun things. But to the point where I'm going all right, dude, and this is before we were friends. When we were friends, we knew each other, but always be these anti-gun laws, anti this, anti that. And it went from okay, I get it. This guy wants gun control to now there's an obsession. Then I find out he was shot. I find out he was robbed and he was shot when he was in his 20s. And I'm going, oh. And listen, I mean, we live up in a country. I mean, we have rifles if we, but when you talked and you said something that night, you kind of broke down, hey, this is what I went through and what my family went through and families that I know went through. By the way, you had one of the greatest, to this day, you've told me one of the greatest things that I've ever heard, and I use it all the time. Do you have any idea who I think I am? That was that night when we were actually waiting to be sat at that place. It was like a little wine bar cocktail place. Yeah. And they were like, you guys got to sit outside and wait 20 minutes. And then you joked and you go, do they have any idea who I think I am? And I was just laughing. But you talked about something. And usually, and that's another reason why I just knew that I liked you. Because usually when somebody is so adamant about politics, I get it. But sometimes I'm like, all right, man, that's heavy stuff. But then when you find out why, where it comes from, their background, things that can hurt them and their family, then you're like, oh, you know what? Everybody's got a story. So it's before somebody judges and before somebody, it's the same thing with Giannis with the guns. And then all of a sudden I see this story about him where him and his boss are walking out of a place at night with a box of money and a guy comes around the corner with a gun. So all of a sudden that's in your head and nobody knows that. People are very quick to say, oh, well, they're taking jobs or this and that. When it's if you just sit and I always said this, man. I always said it. I'm sure you'll agree with this. Regardless of your political or social views on things, if you had an ice cold beer or whatever your drink of choice is, a red wine, and you go into a room, Maz, with a guy who has opposite political views, opposite social views, but you guys are sitting at the same table and that person has their favorite drink and you guys can talk and have a normal conversation, in my opinion, and what makes this country great, and I hope it gets back there one day, is there will be a medium of understanding where somebody could go, you know what, I might not agree with you 100% there, and you might not agree with me, but let's try to find something. And I do think, but I think what's happening now, and I think with everything going on and how crazy things are, especially now during this pandemic, it's hard to actually get in that room and get that drink with that person.
Well, somebody said something to me that I liked a lot. So when the Black Lives Matter protest started, first of all, again, I've always been up for immigrant cause. I'm there. Yeah. So when the travel ban happened, there was protests at the airports. I went down to the airports. I started protesting, and the travel ban banned 6 or 7 countries from coming to America. And they said it was under the guise of making America safer so that no terrorists would be coming in. But none of the countries that were in the travel ban had ever committed an act of terror in America. So I saw some hypocrisy there. I felt for these people. And it was implemented in a way that was horrible because there was people who had visas that were legit and they would land at the airport, and it was implemented that day. So I heard of people who got here, didn't speak English, and the immigration officers were like, here, just sign right here. And they were actually signing their right away on their visa they were getting put back on a plane and sent back to where they came from.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things like that. And I was like, that's just not right. So I go down, I protest. And it was interesting because I saw protests on TV all over the country. And I thought, okay, Americans have understood how hypocritical this law is. But the next day I heard on the radio, someone was saying most Americans still support the travel ban because they think it makes America safer. And that's when I realized, I was like, oh my God, the rest of the country is busy with their lives. They've got kids, they've got jobs, they've got things to do. They are not looking at beyond the headline. They're just going, oh, makes America safer, I'm with it. And so that made me realize that because I always thought, okay, I will go out and support when it's my cause. And like when Black Lives Matters happens, you know, the Black community's got that. When the women's things happen, women got that. When, you know, LGBT happens, they got that. But when it happened to my people and I realized no one else has got my back, I was like, wait a minute. The next time anything happens for any community, I'm going to read into it. And if I agree with what's going on, I got their back. So when Black Lives Matter happened, I started going to the protests. I was like, I got their back. I'm there. I'm with you guys. And it was interesting because I have a lot of my friends, especially a lot of Iranian Americans who are very conservative. And they were like, well, why shouldn't all lives matter? You know, there's looting going on. They're using this excuse to loot this and that. And I was like, guys, I mean, you know, we all got into arguments. I'm sure you probably had arguments and stuff. I was like, guys, I go, do me a favor. I go, have you guys talked to any of your Black friends about this? Because I know as someone who was reading a lot of stories, I came across a handful of Black comedians on Instagram were posting their stories. One guy, I forget who it was, but he had posted a story of like, he's like, I was on my way to go to a meeting with, I don't know, it was like Keenan Ivory Wayans or somebody to pitch a show. I got pulled over. Next thing I know, my head's in the ground. The cops got me down on the ground in the oil. I missed my meeting. I don't know what happened. But so I started hearing from my Black friends and like, and the idea of just getting pulled over for no reason or getting suspected for no reason. So similarly, I threw that at my group of friends who were going that other way. I said, have you talked to any of your Black friends? And one of my buddies, who's this Persian dude who's very conservative, lives in Brentwood. He's like, yeah, you know what? Actually, there is a Black dude that I play tennis with. And he told me whenever he comes to Brentwood, like he gets kind of, you know, they bother him. And I was like, doesn't that bother you that just because he comes into your neighborhood, he's getting bothered? And so there was this girl I was talking to who she's liberal, her husband's conservative. And she said they got into a debate and the husband was getting upset about like this book that their kids were reading. And in the book, they talk about how the war on drugs that Reagan started really kind of led to this prison industrial complex and blah, 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 blah. And this husband who's conservative was upset that Reagan was being blamed. And the wife said, listen, let's just step back for a second and let's try to listen to this story being told by a Black man in this book and try to listen with compassion and openness. And that's what I was getting at, which is if you and I can sit down and you can say, hey, Maz, you know, blah, 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 I'm pro-gun because of X, Y, and Z. And I can say I'm anti-gun because of X, Y, and Z. But we can listen with compassion and openness. Then at least I can understand your story. Like you said, you can listen to Giannis and go, I get it. You can listen to me and go, I get it.
Yeah.
And we can at least leave going, hey, I see why you're like that. And I'm going to not just look at it as a headline, but look at it as affecting individuals. And I think that's a big thing we got to do as a country.
I think so. And I'll take it even a step further. In people's minds, when somebody hears Iranian, somebody's Iranian. A lot of times in the United States, they'll think enemy, terrorist, right? They'll do that. And then all of a sudden, somebody goes to Maz's show. And all of a sudden, they see you up there and you're silly and you're laughing and you're dancing and you're joking and you're doing crowd work. And somebody goes, that dude right there, yeah, he's Iranian. And you're like, oh, so it's those, and I know it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't. You shouldn't have to see a comedian that's from Iran be a fun, silly, and then. But it is amazing that like sometimes it takes people to either see or hear a story like that. And you said something really big, compassion and understanding. And I'm going to flip it now. I'm going to flip it to the other thing, because there is something that I have a lot of friends, and you said something which I really liked that you said, because you were like, of course you're for Black Lives Matter. If anybody, you know, it's a life, you know, but you said something too, where it's like, and when you go, you know, abolish the police, let's not get crazy. And it was almost like, and I was like, that's why I fuck with Maz. That's why this guy, and I could, because you're fair. You're fair and you're honest. And I have dear friends who are police officers. I have one who was down there, and, you know, and things were getting really, like, you know, people were getting hurt, and all, you know, they're being yelled at and they're told this. And I know this guy's got a family. I know he's a good guy. I know he doesn't like to see any prejudice or racist things go on, yet he's targeted. And I guess that comes with everything. But, I think everybody needs to, like you just said, if everybody can listen to the way you listen to your Black friend's story, and then but listen to a cop, listen to an immigrant, listen to somebody who's anti-gun and got shot. So it's like, I think if you do that and you're more understanding, I think too that us being comedians, and tell me what you think about this, because I was talking to family members. What do you think about this, Maz? I think that since we're comedians and we travel, we're able to see different places and people, where people that don't travel, and you just grew up in this neighborhood, and everybody's got, and this side of the neighborhood's conservative, and over there that neighborhood's a little more liberal, and they talk shit about each other. But you know what? You go to the same gym and the same restaurants, and before you know it, you're a teacher in that neighborhood, and you're 40 years old and you never left. We were lucky enough to, our dream let us travel, not just in the United States, but across the world, and meet people and talk people. And we get more of those stories. I feel like a lot of ignorance and a lot of people that are just kind of absent-minded with things like that are people that really don't leave and interact with other people, especially other people of different ethnicities. What do you think about that?
You're absolutely right. I think, you know, unfortunately, it's not a big part of our culture. I mean, I think there's parts of the world where you can live. Like, for example, if you lived in Western Europe, you've got France is next to Germany, is next to Italy, is next to Spain, is next to England. So traveling is a lot easier. You just get on a train, you go, right? America's so big where you really, you know, you don't have to go anywhere. People go to Mexico, but they don't go to Mexico. They go to Cabo or a resort or something. So you're absolutely right. Like, I wish, first of all, when I was in college, my junior year, I did the study abroad program. I spent a whole year in Italy. And it was one of the most pivotal moments in my life, because first of all, I was a lot more independent. I got to learn a language, another culture,
How about
see
that
America.
food? How about
the
that
food was amazing. Forget it. I mean, Italy's amazing, but it was just like, it opened my eyes. And I encourage, anytime I run into any kid who's going to college, I go study abroad, study abroad, study abroad. And I wish there were a mandatory program that made kids in high school even go for a year, because first of all, you learn about another culture. It opens your eyes that most people around the world are just trying to eat, you know, feed their families, just have a decent life. You know, most people are not out there worried about bringing death to America. They're out there trying to be like, bring bread to my family. You know, they don't care about that other shit, you know? Yeah. So that's something you learn, is that a lot of people around the world just trying to live their lives. And the other thing that happens is, I think when you come back to America, you appreciate America more. Like, I think a lot of kids, you know, we're as bad as right now, the world is going through a tough time. But when you go to other countries and you go, wow, look at the poverty there versus like what I have access to, I think it inspires people. So you're absolutely right. I think that, you know, I was just last year, I was touring with my boy Tehran, who, you know, he's my opening act. And we went from, we did a show in upstate New York somewhere. I forget where we were, but then we had to fly from LaGuardia we were coming from Boston and we landed in LaGuardia. So we landed in LaGuardia, and the lady who's driving the van to take us to the rental car, she's in her 40s, and she's talking to us. She goes, "Where are you guys coming from?" And we just came from Boston. And as you know, Boston to LaGuardia is like, what, 45-minute flight or something?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like, "Oh, wow, that's cool." She goes, "You know, I went to Boston once." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And she goes, "Yeah, I've been to Boston. I've been to Vegas." And I was like, "That's it?" She goes, that's it. She's in her 40s.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. I was
Yeah.
like, wait a minute. In 40 something years, you've been to Boston, you've been to Vegas. And that absolutely creates this mentality where, as you said, you see something on TV, you go, they hate us. So, you know, if Fox News tells me they hate us, or if CNN tells me they hate us, then I know that they hate us. Then they tell you that the people coming from Mexico are trying to kill us. Oh, they're trying to kill us. The Indians are trying to mess up the curve in school, so they're trying to get A's. The Chinese so everyone becomes an enemy.
Yeah.
And you haven't traveled to see the world. So you're absolutely right. Travel is so important. The other thing I think that comedy does for us, going back to that whole idea of looking at the psychology of stuff, I think comedians, we are forced to delve deeper into whatever we're thinking about. And you got to go deeper to find the funny.
Yes.
And that's why a lot of times I think people ask me, they go, why are comedians so depressed? I go, because if you're an accountant, you know, you're crunching numbers. You're not really going into the psychology of the numbers, right? But
That's
when you're
great.
Comedian, yeah, you got to delve deeper and deeper and deeper. And when you go deeper and deeper and deeper, if your mindset is not like, if you're not set up to have a relief from whatever that stress is that comes from thinking deeper and deeper, you're gonna get to the point where you're like, oh man, we're screwed. The world sucks.
That's a really, really brilliant, smart take on it. It's almost like before you know it, we get in these deep waters and these uncharted waters, and we're like, oh man, you know what? The world can be a dark, scary place. And then we go, because it's not simple. It's not in a simple bubble. We're always digging deeper and looking further. And sometimes, unfortunately, further can be sad and scary, which the world is, and we kind of know that, and we go into it. That's actually, wow, Maz, that's a really good point, because people are like, why are you down? Why are you anxious? And it's almost like maybe it's because we're aware. And when you're aware of things and you really kind of see things that could be sad, you're like, oh shit. And we obviously mask it and do what we do to make it better. Stand up, and our talent is a little bit of a Band-Aid, so to speak, with it. But yeah, dude, that's really, you know, and it is sad to see somebody 40s, 50s, just like going like, hey man, you know, we went to Vegas in '89 for 3 days. And you're like, what else? And you're like, oh, we go to the beach. And you're like, you're not talking to people. You know, I was talking to Ronnie Chang on the podcast, and Ronnie was saying about how, you know, people were getting nasty towards the Chinese because you know, you guys eat gross shit. You guys eat gross shit. Ronnie was going like, that's 1% of us. He goes, even we're saying you're eating gross shit. Stop it. You know, but like you said, somebody on the news, a Chinese individual ate a bat, and now all of a sudden the world is sick. And now it's like, you know, listen, if a handful of people do something and if you have not traveled there. So I totally agree with you, man. I think that actually hearing that there's probably many 40-year-olds like that woman you're talking about that are sitting home, and that mindset is never changing. And you know what? It is just locked on CNN or locked on Fox. I actually did an experiment the other day where I would go and I would watch Fox, and then you would go and you'd watch the other one, and you're going, this is that side throwing gasoline. And you could actually see how people who do that can get upset, because you're going, well, wait a minute. This is somebody that's supposed to be a trusted anchor, right? That went to school for this, the way that other people go to school for being a lawyer or a doctor. They go to school for journalism, and they're telling me things that are getting me really excited and upset. And then the other way, so the divide, I think it was actually Burr who goes, man, forget the politicians. He goes, how about those two networks stopping that? You know, and it was like you said before, but on a positive note, let's turn this positive. What do you see? Do you think, like, comedy wise, like, you will go, right? Like, so if somebody called you up today and was like, Maz, we got this thing, it's outside, it's 200 people spread out, safe and all that. You're at the point now, as long as you know that it's safe and they're doing the precautions, you'll go and tell the jokes there, right?
Yeah, listen, I will, as you said, if it's outside, if it's safe, if, you know, it's unfortunate because When we went to lockdown, as you said, everybody was like, oh, we'll be locked down for a month or two, and then the numbers will go down, and then we can go back. Well, the jackasses that we are in this country, you know, again, you look at a lot of other countries and they stuck to it. They were like, this is what we're going to do. Masks, distance, blah, blah, blah. We've seen it left and right. People going like, it's my right to go cough on people. All right. Well, if you want to be an idiot, then just be an idiot.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, these numbers have gone back up. And so when I'm told by someone that, yes, it's safe enough to go out, the last thing I want, as a matter of fact, is interesting because early on when this happened, I talked to my manager. There's a place here called Tree People. They're up on Mulholland. It's a great outdoor. They got a little like 300-seat outdoor amphitheater. And I've done fundraisers for them in the summer the past several years. And people come out and they picnic and you do stand up. And it's beautiful. It's in the woods. And I said to him, I go, why don't we talk to the Tree People and say, let's do a weekly outdoor show? And he reached out and they said, listen, the county still hasn't given us permission. And I said to my manager, I said, well, what if like we find a way, it's outdoor, da, da, da. And he goes, listen, the last thing you want to do is be the one who puts your neck on the line and says, let's just do it. And then someone gets COVID and ends up, you know, sick or dying or whatever under your watch. Now it's bigger than you would imagine. So all that to say, if the authorities come out and they say, yes, it's fine, it's legit, you can do outdoors, blah, 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 like this drive-in one, you know, the drive-in one, I guess is safe because families are showing up in cars, they're staying in, I'm outside, I'm doing it. Yes. If they do outdoor shows, absolutely social distance. I mean, I'm dying to gig, you know. I know that you did a couple of shows in clubs, and the closest I've come to that was that one that I did at the Comedy Store where people were outside the window. Again, if they said, hey, this city is safe now and they can do a spread out and it's all sanitized, I'm dying to gig. So yes, I'd be down for it. My feeling, like you said, is that it's not really going to get back into the real flow of things until a vaccine comes out, hopefully early next year. And by spring or summer of next year, we could be back doing what we love doing. But I do feel that people will come out. I think people are starved to go out and see live performances.
I agree. And I was happy with my agency. You know, my William Morris did something when I went to Arizona. They actually called hospitals and they talked to people. Like they went up, like, cause we were talking and I was like, okay, is this okay? And what's going on? And how will I be? And they're like, you know, no meet and greet and the people, and they called up, but like at the same time, it's like, even though you still can't control. So it's like you said, I just want to make sure like nothing on my watch, God forbid. And just make sure that when I go out there, that's not something anyone's thinking about. Like, I want you to sit down with your drink and your food and let's talk about the jokes and the bits and think about that. I don't want anybody going, did I laugh too hard in this direction? Did I spit? Did that guy spit? That can't be a part of this. You know, I did the outdoor thing for Vinny at the Stress Factory. And a woman came up afterwards and she's like, can I come up to you? And I said, like, stand over there, like, stand over there. You know, I'm not trying to be rude. And you know what? We could take a picture. I said, I can't touch you, but you could stand there and I'll kind of do a lean in. But like and then I did apologize and I said, I'm sorry, but look, this is just what it is right now. And, you know, but before this has been, by the way, having you on here again, just so you know, I'm looking at the time here. We've been on here for almost an hour and it feels like we just got started. And I knew it would be like that with you. So I really appreciate you coming on and I hope you enjoyed it. But what I wanted to say was,
of course, man, listen, I'm sorry, don't want to interrupt, but yeah, listen, some people you flow with and you're one of my guys now, you know,
always.
We just met last year, but like, I'm totally on board, man. And anytime you want to do this, and like I said, I'm going to do this Instagram live thing. I'll text you after. We'll figure out a time, but I think it'll be fun to sip and talk and just do it.
We're going to talk after this and we're going to do something with the wine thing for sure. But I wanted to talk to you about food. Okay. I wanted to talk about Persian food. I wanted to talk about, because my mother's 100% Greek. My father's 100% Sicilian. Okay. I have Mediterranean. I love Italian food. I love Greek food. I love spicy food, but there's a food that I love and I tell people, and I love Middle Eastern. I love Jordanian. Like, I love that type of food. And you being from Iran, I saw you, I don't know who you were talking about. You were talking to somebody, I don't know who it was, but you're talking about Persian food and the spices. But you guys have cuisine that, in my opinion, not talked about enough. Okay. I just don't, everybody always goes Italian, Asian, Mexican, even Indian is put above you guys. And I got to tell you something. You guys are no slouch when it comes to cuisine, man. And I just wanted to say I want to hear your thoughts on it and talk about some dishes that you think would blow me away, because I love a little spice.
All right. So first of all, I'm going to help you. First of all, I'm going to help you say the country's name right, because I just heard you say it. So instead of Iran, go Iran, like E and a guy named Ron. Say Iran.
Iran.
Yeah, Iran. So Iran, Iranian food or Persian food is fine, but just Iran.
Iran.
Boom, you got it. Now,
got it.
Persian food, dude, is some of the most delicious stuff in the world. I mean, and I'm not just saying that because I'm Iranian. It's, first of all, years ago, I always tell the story. I was listening to NPR. There was this couple. They traveled the world. They did. They wrote a book called "Around the World in 80 Diets." And at the end of the interview, yeah, and
That's
at the
great.
end of the interview, the interviewer goes, "What's your favorite cuisine?" And like the lady was like, "I don't know, blah blah blah." The guy goes, "I got to tell you, Persian food." And the thing about Persian food, because you're right, Middle Eastern food is great, Lebanese, Jordanian, all that. Persian food is right up there with the rice, with the kebabs, with the toppings. It's like Indian food, but not as spicy. So it doesn't give you the heartburn that Indian food might give you.
It's leaner. It's more healthy.
It's more healthy. And I'll tell you, I think the reason, like, we have not quite found a way, like the way like Japanese food eventually became sushi, and it's like everywhere now people eat sushi. Iranians haven't quite found the way to come into the American culture to just be like, oh, go pick up some Persian food. Like it hasn't become that yet. So yeah. I think what you might have seen, Padma Lakshmi, who is top chef, she's a model, she's amazing, and she's in the food world. She just did a show called Taste the Nation, which is on Hulu, which people should watch. It's amazing. She did 10 episodes, and it just got renewed for season 2.
Good.
But she goes to different communities around the country, gets to know their food, gets to know them, kind of like Bourdain, but it's got a different, like, especially nowadays with all the craziness going on, she goes and humanizes people. So one of the episodes, she goes to Los Angeles, which has the biggest populations of Iranians outside of Iran. And she comes to Los Angeles, and I kind of act as one of the people bringing her into the community. And we go to have some Persian food together. And it's an amazing episode because you watch it. First
That's
of all,
what it was. I think, yeah. Was there like a trailer for that or something?
Yes.
That's what I saw.
Yeah, it's on Hulu. It's called Taste the Nation. And any episode you watch, you're like, oh, I got to go eat that.
You
like food, you got to check it out.
Yeah, and you made a good point. It's not like, because when you're home, right, and you go, hey, let's do sushi, or let's go. Nobody's ever like, you want to do Persian tonight? And it should be. It should be, because the kebabs and the way the vegetables are cooked and the way everything, the flavors of that, because there are some places down by the cellar, there are some places in the village that you go to and you're eating it and you're going like, this Persian restaurant is like, this is like such a delicious taste, and it doesn't have to always be 3 places that you pick from.
Yeah, and by the way, the fact that you said you're Greek Italian, like you could put Greek, Italian, and Persian food as 3 of the top foods. I mean, it's like, they're all right there. They're Mediterranean. They use the olive oils. They use the base. The Greeks probably do more. They have the rice in there. The Persians got the rice. Italians got the pasta. I mean, all that food is so delicious. They do a thing. The Persians, we do a thing where when we cook the rice, we let the bottom burn a little bit so it becomes crispy rice, and it's called tagig, which actually means the bottom of the pan, and it is one of the most heavenly things you'll ever taste, because it's got.
And what do they put on top of that?
Bro, you can put on top, you put these different broths on top. I mean, it's like, I'm getting hungry just talking about it. It is so good.
Oh, dude, that was my next question, was actually addition. You just told me. Well, what can I say, dude? This has been honestly, man, when we were talking, and I was like thinking, I go, how come I got to get Maz on the show? And me and that guy just click, and that hour was so seamless, but we're going to do it again, because It's just the chemistry of talking to somebody that is just, you know, very similar. And it's funny because you came, I'll bring this full circle now. You came to the United States in late 78, and I was born November of 78. So I was probably a month or so old. If you're talking about the winter of 78, I was a month or two old when your dad called up and said, guys, why don't you come here and stay with me for a while? And here we are. But Maz,
and you were in New York. You were in New York at the time.
And I was in New York.
I was in New York. There you go.
So you flew
drinking
down.
the same water.
You touched down as I was, you know, and then it happened to be the Eddie thing. So what could people see? Where can people see your website, your social media? Please plug all of that. And if there's anything you got, let them know.
Across the board, as you know, on this lockdown, we're all trying to create content. So people can find me at Maz Jobrani on Instagram. I'm always trying to put up some stuff, some political, some funny, some whatever. So find me on Instagram, follow me there at Maz Jobrani, Twitter. Everything is at Maz Jobrani. My special on Netflix is called Immigrant. I hope they check that out. I got a ton of clips on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. Again, my name, Maz Jobrani, MazJobrani. And again, if you got Hulu, Taste the Nation, 10 episodes. I'm in the Persian episode 6. Hope you enjoy it. And Paul, thanks for having me, man. Always a blast.
Dude, guys, this has been TVE episode 460, and I can tell you this right now. The man you just heard me speak to for an hour is one of the most talented, and not only that, you blew me away with the acting clips. This guy is not only a brilliant stand-up comedian and performer, he's a brilliant actor. I want you to look at all of the stuff he does because he's that good. And I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. Maz, thank you for being here. And guys, till next time, I will talk to you soon.